Welcome to the Week 6 LA City Baseball video. Connor Morissette and Alex Scar. Alex, it's spring break for a lot of LAUSD students, but baseball teams, they're taking no days off. We got teams in San Diego, in Las Vegas. Tough for us to cover some of these games, but baseball's still going on, even though school is not in session.
Yeah, some of them are playing right now as we speak. They got some morning games, some afternoon games. They're going to be playing all week. This is the best time of the season for a lot of these kids. They get to go out of state. They're riding the bus with the teammates. They're staying in hotels. They're playing laser tag after games.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff on Twitter we're seeing.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I know Camino is having a good time. Birmingham's having a good time. And most of these schools in our top 10, they are out of the area right now.
Yeah,
so
I think all of them are.
Yeah, at least most of them are. And they're playing some really good baseball as we head towards the final weeks of the season.
So before we get into our top 10, remember, it's 12 teams who make the open division. So we have our 10 right now, and we'll get to that in a second. But who are some teams, Alex, who you think are right on that outside looking in, who maybe will get the 11th, 12th seeds in that open division in a few weeks?
Well, you know what, Connor? As we head towards the end of the season, some of the teams we talked about earlier, they're starting to fall off.
Yeah.
And I think some of those open division cases, a team like Sylmar, for instance,
it's probably done.
They're starting to fall down a little bit, and yeah, their odds, I think, are pretty slim. But some of the teams that are making some nice cases with some recent wins, I think Kennedy and Granada Hills. I was at the Granada Hills Chatsworth game. We'll talk about Chatsworth in a second, but just chatting about here, Granada Hills. They were 10-10 right now, 1-3 in league, picked up their first league win against Chatsworth, a 5-2 victory. Jude Gustafson, just a freshman, a complete game there against Chatsworth. Nick Quintero hit his first high school bomb, a shot to left field, and Isaiah Velasco, 3 RBIs, a 3-run double. They're in Vegas now. So Granada Hills, a couple of nice wins here. If they can string them together in league, I think the open division case will be a little bit more solid, but for now, they're right there.
And you saw them last year sneak in at number 12. Maybe they'll do something similar this year. And that series against Taft coming up in a few weeks will be huge because I think
the winner of that kind of becomes de facto last spot in the open division.
I agree. And if it's a split, maybe we'll ask some questions. But remember, Chatsworth swept Taft. Granada picked up a win against Chatsworth. So right now that favors Granada for sure. Yeah, so they should have a shot to make the open division. I agree with you. And then Kennedy, they're coming on strong as well.
Yeah, they were 12-0 and 3-2 against Sylmar. They had to walk off against Sylmar in 12 innings in that second game. But Miguel Velasquez for the week went 5 for 10, 4 RBIs. Kennedy's 8-6 right now, and they get San Fernando at the end of the month. And that's, at the beginning of May.
End of the year.
End of the year. So that's really going to tell us what is this team made of. And if they win out through Valley Mission League, and then are undefeated going into that San Fernando game, that's going to decide the league title. So those have huge implications, those games. But it seems like the more that they play, the more they win. That open division case is becoming stronger, just outside of our top 10, but don't write them off for the open division.
And you mentioned San Fernando. They are number 10 this week. They're 13-4. Swept Panorama pretty much as expected, and they're playing in the Blazer Spring Bash in Vegas this week. We wanted them to go out and beat Panorama twice, and that's what they did. Pretty easy stuff for the Tigers.
Yeah, Panorama, Reseda, Canoga Park, not a ton of tough competition in the Valley Mission League like I just got done talking about. They get Kennedy in that first week of May. That's going to be that really big test. Sylmar doesn't look like they really have the legs to compete with these two teams. They're going to be a tough out in Division I, but it seems like it's going to be Kennedy and San Fernando. Like you mentioned, 13-4, 8-0 in league. They're just rolling right now.
At number 9, we have Chatsworth. They were 7 a week ago. They slipped 2 spots after splitting with Granada Hills this past week. Alex, you mentioned how you were at that second game where Granada won. So why does Chatsworth fall?
Well, Chatsworth fall, I just don't see enough from them. I thought maybe this year they would be able to scrap together a couple of wins, piece some things together. Now, of course, the season isn't over just because you drop one game to Granada Hills, but I wasn't really impressed with that talent that I saw that day. Maybe I just caught them on a bad day. It was a Friday afternoon. Maybe it just wasn't a good day of school. Things happen. One guy I was impressed by, Austin Carrillo. We talked about him last year. Kid's a stud. He's really their best hitter. But then also catcher Gabino Lopez. Just a junior, really excited with what that kid brings. Got a good arm behind the dish, a nice sweet swing. He's going to be a nice player. And Roman Wayne on the hill had a nice, decent fastball. Thing is, he just left a couple of pitches up. We talked about Quintero hitting a bomb, Isaiah Velasco hitting a 3 RBI double to the gap. Just a couple of mistakes. But Chatsworth, hey, you got to win games. These other teams, that's what they're doing. They're going out and they're sweeping their league opponents. I think Granada is probably the best league opponent that some of these teams have faced. But still, you got to go out and win ball games.
Yeah, and Chatsworth did sweep Taft a couple weeks ago, but giving up that first win to Granada, it's good for Granada to get off the schneid, but yeah, it stings for Chatsworth. So they're up to 9. Number 8, Pauley, 11-7-1. They swept Monroe and beat St. Genevieve on Saturday. They're in Vegas, just like a bunch of these teams. And Alex, I have in my notes here, they played North Hollywood, which on paper might be kind of a tough matchup, but they the rest of the regular season against LA City competition, they really shouldn't drop a game.
No, I don't think so. They should go undefeated. Verdugo Hills was the big test in the East Valley League.
2-2-0 wins last week.
2-2-0 wins, exactly. They swept them, so it seems like they should roll undefeated, and that will cement them in the open division. There's really no question about that. Like you mentioned, they swept Monroe. How about Arthur Rivera? A 5-inning shutout. We haven't talked about him at all. He came out, pitched really, really well against Monroe, and then Christian Ruiz went 3 for 4. Then, of course, the guy we talk about every week, Elias Galavis, he gave himself a complete game, 1-hit shutout, struck out 11. Pauly's a really tough pitching team. I saw them against El Camino Real, shut them down. Saw them against Cleveland, shut them down again. So they can really attack and take it to some of these really, really good lineups, and that's why we have Pauly just ahead of Chatsworth.
Certainly a dark horse, title-contending team when you have that kind of pitching. It'll be tough. Got to get the bats going. Do they have enough depth? That's a question. But if Elias Galavis can throw a couple gems, next thing you know, they're in the semifinals. That is a real possibility this year. We're not looking at an all West Valley League last 4, I believe. So we'll see. What do I know? But I don't know. It's a little different this year.
Open.
It just kind of feels
like definitely open.
Number 7, Banning, 11-9. Last week, split with Carson. That first game you were there, 15-1.
It was weird.
Dominating win. Jaja Bellinger was injured, right? Yeah. So they chased him out of the game, but it was an injury. Still, though, the bats were going crazy for Banning in that game, like nothing we've seen. And then they dropped the next game, though, to Carson 7-2. So what happened in that first game? Anthony Hoya was dealing, it sounded like, and the bats were just ripping.
That game, that shouldn't have been a 15-1 game. Jaja Bellinger, not exactly sure what happened. Maybe it looked like it might have been a groin, couldn't finish his pitches. He got out of that second inning, I believe. Couldn't finish that second inning. And then I think maybe Coach Mancaros was just like, let's punt this one. We've got them later. Let's get some guys some innings. And things just did not go well. 15-1, and it seemed like everything Banning was hitting. The wind was carrying a little bit. Balls were flying out to center field. So the score looks a lot worse than it is, but Anthony Hoya, he struck out 11. You score 1 run, doesn't matter if the other team scores 15 or they score 2, you're still not going to win the game, and Hoya pitched really, really well. So for Banning right now, they split. That 15-1 game might not be exactly accurate, but hey, a win's a win, and they'll certainly take it.
And a couple weeks ago, we had Banning outside our top 10, and we were wondering, where are these quality wins? They're losing a lot of games as a young team. Well, in that time, they've beaten Palisades, and they've picked up a win against Carson.
Right back.
And those 2 wins are enough to get that third team into the Marine League, I think. I think San Pedro for sure, Carson for sure, and then Banning will have a great opportunity as well, because we talked about the 2 teams who are kind of on the outside of that top 10, maybe the 11-12 seeds, Granada Hills, Kennedy. I think Banning is pretty firmly in front of those 2 teams.
Well, if you just look at who was in the open division last year, Roosevelt, they were a 5 seed last year. I don't think they're really in any position to make a jump into the open division. So there are going to be some spots open. I know Kennedy, they were a high seed last year. They're probably not going to be that high this year. So seeds are out there for the taking, and I think you can pretty much write it, maybe in pencil, not pen, not Sharpie, write it in pencil, 3 Marine League teams in the open division.
At 6, the team who split with Banning last week, it's Carson, so we touched on them a little bit with Jaja Bellinger getting hurt. Hopefully he'll be okay, because Carson's going to need him to pitch, and his bat is so important, does a little bit of everything for that team. You saw him lose 15-1, but you kind of talked about how maybe they punted a little bit, so that loss, of course it concerns you, but it's not a devastating loss, so to speak, correct?
No, not really a backbreaker, and for that reason, we still have Carson ahead of Banning, because in that second game, Nick Salas pitched really well. 6 1/3 innings, just gave up 1 run, struck out 5. That was a 1-run ball game going into the 7th inning, and then Carson explodes for 5 runs, and they win that one 7-2. The reason that I keep Carson ahead of Banning, if Jaja finishes that game, it's an entirely different story, and that's what I was hoping I would see.
Yeah,
I'd see an ace-off, right? I'd see Anthony Hoya for Banning, and then I'd see Bellinger for Carson, and of course, Bellinger gets banged up a little bit. I really hope his arm is still healthy.
Yeah.
It wasn't an arm issue, it wasn't a shoulder or an elbow. Maybe it's a lower body, it's a groin. Those things that can kind of heal a little bit more quickly, get him back on the hill, because he's a huge piece, and when he's on, he's untouchable.
I agree. We saw what he was able to do against Cleveland.
Yeah,
remember,
dominated.
Cleveland, we almost had them number 1 a couple weeks ago. We'll get to them in a little bit. He dominated them, and Carson won 10-0 on that day. So when he's on, he's on. Cleveland, a title contender for sure, and Jaja Bellinger blanked him, or them, I should say. So who knows, man? Sometimes in the city section baseball, it gets kind of crazy. Palisades, is number 5. They're 17-3. They swept Westchester. Pretty similar to San Fernando with Panorama. We thought that they would have a good outcome against Westchester, and that's what happened, 8-2 and 11-0. They're in San Diego this week. Good to see the bats come alive for the Pali Dolphins.
Yeah, we thought that would happen, like you mentioned. I thought Westchester, they'd give them opportunities. They would throw the ball over the middle of the plate, and when it wasn't down the middle, it might be off the zone. They're going to walk guys. They're going to give you opportunities, and guys seem to take advantage of it. Jared Brecker, Conrad Smith both went 3 for 3. Will Kokiard had a nice day, went 3 for 5. Lucas Braun struck out 12 in 6 innings. And then we talked about Will Kokiard coming back on the hill for Palisades. He's been a little bit hurt. hasn't thrown a ton. Willie went 5 innings, just gave up 2 hits, struck out 11. So Palisades, that's called taking care of business. Now they're down in San Diego. I think they get Otay Ranch earlier this week. Those are some tough teams they're going to face. San Diego's no slouch for baseball, so they're going to be tested.
It seems like the majority of teams in that 10 to 6 range are in Vegas.
They're in Vegas.
And then
the top teams seem to be in San Diego.
Yep, I agree. For Birmingham, 12-10. They swept Taft 5-0 and 6-0. Lost to Crescenta Valley in the middle of the week, though, 7-6 in 9 innings,
Extras,
I believe.
yeah,
So
rough.
really tough loss for them. And they're the one team that's in Vegas in the top 5, so got to give a shout-out to Birmingham. Looks like they're having a blast. You mentioned
the laser tag. I think they went to Buffalo Wild Wings playing some dodgeball. Dude,
missed
I
being
miss
part of
high
the team.
school,
Yeah, I know. Awesome. So the pitching. There's been a big question with Birmingham, but Gavino Rosales threw a complete game in Game 2 against Taft. Burke Garcia returned to form and pitched a complete game in Game 1. It's good to see the pitchers kind of go out and shove a little bit, because against Cleveland, some of the pitching in that series was a little bit questionable, and Birmingham looks to be back. I know it's Taft, probably the worst team in the West Valley League, but still nice to see them go out and get a result.
Yeah, a couple things I liked about this, a couple of shutouts. Maybe you're not putting up 10 runs, maybe you're not mercying them, but the pitching's alive, and I don't care who the competition is. When you dominate a lineup and you throw a shutout, that builds confidence. A pair of complete games, that's really impressive for
only
Burt
2 arms
to
in 2
jump
games,
back. Exactly, so that the bullpen stays healthy. Burt gets kind of back on the horse a little bit. You talk about Gavino Rosales, a complete game 4-hitter, really dominating Taft there. Then welcome back Johnny Tincher, had a couple of knocks in the game against Taft. Kevin almost went 2 for 3 and had 2 RBIs. And we got to shout out Burke Garcia, win number 20 in his high school career.
Wow.
Got another senior season to go. I think he can easily get to 30. So congrats to Albert.
And Taft has a couple tough bats in that lineup as well. It's not easy.
No, it's not a
work.
pushover,
Yeah,
right.
so I want to give those guys credit. And we'll see if they can bounce back in the West Valley League a little bit more, because remember, started 0-2 against Cleveland. Now you move on to 2-2. We'll see if they can keep climbing the ladder. At number 3, San Pedro, 19-1. Swept Rancho Dominguez last week. 15 wins in a row now for them. Incredible. 3-run bomb for Jake Harper in one of those games. It's the bats. I mean, allowing 6 runs, I think, in one of those Rancho Dominguez games. Not a great look. Rancho's not that good of a team, but the bats are alive, and that's what we've talked about week in and week out with this team. Pretty much 1-9, they can hit.
Yeah, I have in my notes here, are we crazy to not have them number 1?
Yeah, Eric Sontheimer still rides with them as the top team in the city in his top 25, which makes sense.
Yeah,
it's understandable.
No. And they're 19-1, right? You just look at the record, you think there's no way there's a team that's better than they are, and we have all kinds of rationale to talk about this. But we're talking about San Pedro right now. Jake Harper, just a double short of the cycle, had a 3-run home run, had a triple, a single, 4 RBIs. They're in San Diego this week. I think they have Francis Parker here today, so they're going to be tested early like we were talking about some of these other teams. Palisades getting tested. Pedro's going to be tested. Talk about Cleveland, El Camino. All of these teams playing the best that San Diego has to offer. So we're going to see, does San Pedro have the pitching to slow down some of those good San Diego lineups? We know they have the hitting, but if Scognamio's not on, who gets the ball? Who do they turn to? And who can shut down a lineup? And those questions, hopefully, will be answered this week.
So the rationale for me having them 3, the pitching is still a bit of a question mark. And I know they've won 15 in a row, so how can you say that? The strength of schedule is
not quite as good.
Yeah, is also right there. I'd love to see them get a Valley or a West Valley League team on the schedule just on a Saturday and kind of see what would happen if they went up against a Birmingham or a Cleveland or an El Camino Real. That could be a really fun
Gonna
game.
have to wait to the playoffs.
Yeah, just to kind of see where they're at with that. So that's my rationale, because I think these West Valley League teams, looking at Cleveland, looking at El Camino Real, they are really challenging themselves in the league and then outside the league as well. San Pedro, not quite. You got to respect the 15 wins in a row, and I certainly think they're an open division contender.
Oh, yeah.
Like I said last week.
A semifinal team, I think.
Yeah, the top 3 teams all have, in my eyes, a 33% chance. I think it's that close, but they're 3 because of that pitching and the strength of schedule. At 2, we have Cleveland, and I was at that first game against El Camino Real last week.
That was a walk-off, right?
It was. Kai Moran had a little single off of Cole Kitchen. Next thing you know, Cleveland wins 3-2 after trailing 2-1 for a lot of that game. Cleveland was up 1-0 early, and then Elko picked up 2 runs in the 4th or the 5th, I believe. And then from there, Cleveland, they had a big 7th inning and won the game. Next, or 2 days later, though, Andy Ambriz hits a big grand slam in El Camino. Real wins, so that's why I guess the run margin is why we have them 1 and 2, because those games were so close. But with Cleveland, Elko probably should have swept. You got to give Cleveland credit for winning games. They've won a lot of games where you thought, oh, how did they win this one? Thousand Oaks comes to mind, where Thousand Oaks out hit them by like 6 hits or something, and they still won that game against Elko. Cole Kitchen was dealing. They got to him. They find ways to win ball games, which is really impressive. So I don't want to hold the style points against them a little bit because they're winning games, but that's kind of the question mark I had.
Yeah.
Elko played really well, and the game got away from them in that first one. Probably should have ended up sweeping Cleveland, but they didn't, so Cleveland stays at number 2 because they're winning games.
Yeah, any way you can, right? Can't defend, perfect placement, hit them where they ain't, doesn't matter. Put out any of these baseball cliches. Cleveland seems to scratch and claw and get these victories. And we talked about why San Pedro isn't in the top 2. It's the pitching. And for Cleveland, it seems like their starting pitching is really solid. We talk about Braden Lowe, the freshman, Chris Lozano, the junior. Both of those guys pitched really, really well against El Camino Real. So Cleveland, it's 1 and it's 1A.
Yeah.
I said last week, El Camino Real, they're the best team here in the city section. I still believe that, but I think Cleveland, of any team, they're the closest behind.
I agree with that. And at number 1, like we've been saying, El Camino Real, 13-6-1, split with Cleveland, like we said, losing 3-2 and then winning 8-2. The fact that Cleveland got to Cole Kitchen, I thought was interesting, but they didn't really get to him.
I was going to ask you, any hard hit balls, any stuff in the gap?
So there was, I don't want to call it an error, but one really kind of key hit right to the second baseman, slow roller, runner save. I wouldn't say that Cleveland went out and really
raked him.
Yeah, not at all. And Cole's a fantastic pitcher, probably number 2 or number 3 in the city in our eyes. And I thought he pitched really well, but Cleveland, like they've done all year, they've kind of found ways to win. So I wouldn't say that, Cleveland beat Cole Kitchen. Watch out in the playoffs. He's going to get in trouble. No, it was just another really solid afternoon from him. He was pitching in the 7th. No one else from Elko got the ball in that first game. Coach Leinhardt said, hey, go out and win the game for us. It came up a little short on that occasion, but I don't look at Cole Kitchen any different after that game. And I still think the 1-2 punch of him and Adam Christopher is going to be huge in the playoffs. The lineup with Ambries, he's probably the best power hitter in the city, right?
Yeah, he's raking right now.
I think that team is really, really strong, and I agree. If it ended today, I'd probably pick them to win the whole thing.
Yeah, and we talked about it last year, and the theme continues this year. It's pitching. In the playoffs, it's pitching. If you can throw starters back-to-back in the same game, you have an entire week between games, certainly in the later rounds, so that makes such a big difference. Cole Kitchen and Adam Christopher, they're the best 1-2 punch right now in the city. Adam Christopher had a great outing against Cleveland. We talked about Joey Klein as a good hitter. He also pitches pretty well. They beat Redondo 10-0, and Redondo's a pretty good team. So El Camino, the things are clicking right now. League play with Birmingham, that's still looming. Of course, the big rivalry with Chatsworth, that's still coming. A couple of big games, you can't stub your toe. You got to take care of business. If a team beats you, they beat you. But I'm sure Leinhardt, at this point in the season, he's saying, just can't beat ourselves.
Yeah.
Go out, play like we know how to play, throw strikes, feel the ball, know where we're going every single pitch, and hopefully things will take care of themselves because the talent, like you mentioned, pitching is there. Andy Ambries bolstering that lineup. They're a really tough team, and that's why we have it number 1.
Yeah, you just love the way the lineup's built or the roster's built, I should say. Good pitching, good hitting. It's a good, consistent team.
All-around complete team, yeah.
And so for the second week in a row now, or it might be third, I forget when we flipped them in Birmingham, but Elko remains at number 1. King of K's, Alex, Anthony Hoya at Banning.
Yes, sir.
Only 5 innings of work, but struck out 11 in that 15-1 win against Carson. You were there, and we'll play the video right now. Strikeout after strikeout after strikeout.
Oh, yeah. Now, I don't want to take anything more away from Hoya. I already said that Carson was down a little bit. Dude, the umpire in this game, I don't know if the umpire had a date or an early dinner reservation. The strikeouts were way above the letters. He wasn't afraid to ring up anybody, but that doesn't matter. Hoya was still missing a ton of bats. Guys weren't barreling him up. He just got bailed out on a couple of calls, but there will be a couple of strikeouts in this video. You're looking at it like, dude, really? And I think the Carson fans are thinking like, you gotta be kidding me. Either way, doesn't matter. Striking out 11 in 5 innings. Most of his strikeouts were of the swinging variety anyway, so that still tells me he's a dominant pitcher. And finally, Anthony Hoya, a pitcher we've been talking about all year, gets a shout-out on our King of K's.
Yep, pitched really well. Only a sophomore, so he'll be one to watch not only this year, but for years to come.
He's going to get so much better.
Absolutely, yeah. He has the genes. He's a tall kid.
And the pitcher body,
man.
A big lefty who throws in the high 80s as a sophomore. He's already 6'1", about 200 pounds. Colleges, I'm sure, are already calling.
Yeah, in the summer he took a visit to the University of Miami for a camp, and they worked him out. They're recruiting him a little bit, so we'll see what happens with that story. Games to watch, like we said, unless you're in Vegas or San Diego, really not much going on in the city section this week. So enjoy spring break if you're not on the baseball field and you can relax. If you're playing baseball, keep grinding, keep going hard because these tournaments, good way to stay in shape. Don't really hold much weight in terms of seating and stuff for the city section, but the reps, it's important. Have fun, bond. It's what a lot of these guys are going to do. It's a good time. That'll do it for the Week 6 LA City Baseball video. He's Alex Scar. I'm Connor Morissette. We'll be back in 2 weeks after the spring break tournaments come to a close and league play picks back up. We'll be back to recap that week. So look out for us in about 14 days' time. See you next time.